Jill and Stacy show.
Oh, we have State Rep Marianne Proctor with us today, District 60. She's going to update us on all the bills she sponsored and co-sponsored and how her first week in Frankfurt was. How are you, Marianne?
I am doing excellent. Thanks for asking. Well, I have sponsored a lot of bills so far. The first week of session was it was crazy, the things that were going on, but there's some really good bills that came up that I am already on. Of course, the one I think is most important is House Bill 142, which is mine. And that bill is a bill that protects homeowners from squatters. So this is, my understanding is there's going to be several bills introduced in the House on squatting, but I worked with a lot of people on this bill, including certainly the realtors, our law enforcement, our county prosecutor, our county attorney, because I think what makes my bill a little bit unique from some of the other ones that I'm hearing about is mine, one defines a squatter to make it easier for law enforcement to act on that. And then two, it makes squatting a felony. Right now, it's a misdemeanor to break and enter into somebody's house, but this is a felony, and it allows law enforcement a way to immediately remove somebody from a property that doesn't belong to a squatter. And not just in your home, but also on commercial property as well, which we're finding more and more problems with that, where people are squatting out on commercial property. And, the way that they find out about them is that they are cooking their meth or whatever they're doing and they set themselves on fire. And then our firefighters have to go in there and put that out, and it's really putting them at great risk. So it protects homeowners. It protects people with commercial property. And also another unique aspect of this bill, it protects people who are being fraudulently leasing a place. So we have a lot of bad actors who are coming in and they will fraudulently list a home for sale or for lease, and somebody will see that and be like, oh man, that rent's so cheap. And then they will send money to this fraudulent person when it's a real listing, but it's not the person that's listing it that's communicating with these people. So it protects people who have already been defrauded once. They wouldn't be considered a squatter, but it also allows law enforcement to cross state lines to prosecute these people who are doing these fraudulent leases.
I didn't realize it was such a big issue.
Well, it's becoming a bigger issue. Certainly, we've seen it in other states, but you may have seen the stories coming out of Louisville where somebody let somebody stay like in their house for a period of time while they were kind of getting on their feet. And then these people just gradually took over, changed the electricity bill to their name and started changing all those things. And actually the homeowner lost to these people that he was just trying to goodwill with. But we're also seeing Representative Roberts was telling me about, he's had this very problem of squatters and mobile homes and how difficult it is to get rid of them. But, I think our concern was this is an area that has a lot of snowbirders that are gone for an extended period of time, or people who maybe have more than one property. This allows them to get rid of squatters in a legal manner, an expedient manner that doesn't put the financial burden on the homeowner.
I saw a bill in there about fluoridation.
Yes, that's House Bill 16 that Representative Mark Hart is bringing again. It's going to make it a local issue where people can decide if they want to opt out of having fluoride in the water. I believe he's been working on this. This might be his 8th year of working on this bill. It got through the House last year and it died over in the Senate. So I think with Trump's mandates, and if he does bring in RFK, that certainly this is an issue that he's concerned about, and it's not just a Kentucky issue, but really a national issue as we have more data coming in. Still, we have strong voices that are opposed to it. I personally support it to get rid of this and let the local municipalities make that determination.
Well, I also like the one, an act relating to the taxation of currency and bullion currency and declaring an emergency.
Well, this is a brilliant bill that Representative Roberts, pretty impressive how he got this on his 4th day in office and got all the House leadership to sign on to it. But it really is a pushback against Governor Beshear. He line item vetoed part of in our budget bill last session, which was unconstitutional. We could have overridden it. I really don't understand all the ins and outs of why we didn't pursue that option. I guess they thought perhaps this would be tied up in courts. But if this bill goes through, it will legislatively, the way that we should be doing things, allow not to collect the tax on this thing that the House already said we should not be collecting taxes on. However, the governor has chosen to do that by that line item veto. So this would just allow restitution for those people who have been paying taxes on things that they shouldn't have. It's a great bill. I was very happy to hop on that one.
Ooh, what about the tax exemption for motor vehicles?
Yeah, so that was brought by Representative Maddox, and she makes a strong argument. Why are we taxing property we already own and been taxed on? And the example that she uses is a great example of you have a vehicle that's 20, 30 years old. You are still paying the tax on that, the ad valorem tax on that, and that's ridiculous. So this is getting rid of it at the state level to get rid of that tax. It's brilliant. We shouldn't be paying this, and I'm supportive of it, and I'm hopeful that it will go through.
So interesting, HB 65 relating to displaying the 10 Commandments in schools. I had just learned, I was not aware that Daddy Bashir is the one, as AG in Kentucky, got them removed in the first place.
That is my understanding. So really, this is just returning to what we used to have before. It's not, any kind of indoctrination or anything that really people should find offensive. We have the 10 Commandments in various places. Why not allow to be able to have them in the public schools? So I supported that one. I think one of the fun ones is House Bill 207. As you all are very aware, in the school board meetings, that people have been thrown out or their speech has been limited on reading objectionable material that they find in their children's books or curricula. And if it's too vile for the school boards to hear it, then perhaps it's too vile to be in the schools. So what this bill would do is if somebody's reading this information at a school board meeting saying, hey, this is what's in here, and they say, oh, no, you can't read that, that's too bad, then it gets rid of it from our curricula. So House Bill 177, it's just a refiling of Representative Rawlings, I guess now Senator Rawlings' bill that he did. I'm not sure why this one stalled out. It made it through committees. He gave testimony on it, but it never got the opportunity to be called to the floor. So we're hoping that he already laid all the legwork last session, that this one should hopefully go through. It's exactly what it was last time, just, filing in the House, and I believe he's done a mirror or a companion to it in the Senate. This is the one filed by Representative Callaway, and this is in response to Governor Bashir's executive order. It was unconstitutional that he did this summer. So that's primarily why I'm on this bill, because that has been part of my promise to the people. If, why do I vote on things or why do I sponsor things? If it's unconstitutional, I'm going to be opposed to it. If it raises your taxes, I'm going to be opposed to it. If it increases the role of government, I'm going to be opposed to it. And this one kind of does everything but raise taxes. The way that this executive order is written that Bashir did this summer that circumvented the General Assembly, he's completely ignoring the distinct branches of governments and our role. Also in this bill, I understand conversion therapy is controversial. I'm not saying I necessarily support conversion therapy, but what I am concerned about by the language of this bill, you could see where if somebody took their child to a pastor for pastoral counseling on anything related to their gender or identity, that could be construed as conversion therapy and it caused them to lose their license or to lose their pastoral position. So it's not very well defined and it's unconstitutional. So that is why I am on this bill as a response to what the governor did.
It's amazing to me how he does things that aren't legal and unconstitutional when he used to be the AG of our state. So it's not like he doesn't know.
Well, and I think he's very clever in how he does this because he picked a topic that is controversial, that is going to excite some of the loudest lobbying groups out there, or to throw them red meat by calling it conversion therapy. And I've taken quite a bit of heat over this, but it's interesting when people want to engage with me on this. I will tell them it's unconstitutional and let me help you understand why. And the response has been very to like, well, there's other things that you could choose to be constitutional about. And well, no, I don't pick and choose what parts of the Constitution I want to follow. I believe we should follow all of it. Or, it's just been those groups that have just been, you're torturing people, you're a terrible person. I think they just don't fully understand what his executive order was. And he'll use a word like the conversion therapy and just to kind of demonize it and make it so polarizing that who in their right mind would want to push back against that? I don't know if that's what he was thinking, but it seems to be a logical conclusion.
What about HB 90 relating to freestanding birthing centers?
Isn't that fantastic? This is what Representative Nemes and over in the Senate, Shelley Funky Frommeyer have been working on to get these freestanding birthing centers. So I love it because it's kind of a first chipping away on certificate of need. But there's a lot of reasons why I support this bill, but I think it's great to allow mothers to decide where they want to have their children and what kind of place. So for those that want to be at the freestanding birthing centers or to be able to do things that have their children at home, it just allows more latitude. I think Representative Nemes and Funky Frommeyer, they worked really hard last year, and particularly with St. Elizabeth's. There was a lot of pushback from the Hospital Association, but St. Elizabeth's definitely had the loudest voice in this. And I think there's been some concessions to them that makes this a little bit more palatable, or at least they hopefully will be neutral on this bill and that we will see it go through. It was on part of my House bill last year on my services, one of the 7 services that I wanted to exempt from certificate of need. So I'm really glad to see at least this part of it going through. They've done a great job. I'm hopeful it does. Representative Massaroni, she's obviously a veteran. She understands this very well. She and many of us are of the belief that if you look constitutionally, we should not be deploying our troops if we do not have a declared war. We are in many proxy wars right now, and our National Guard is deployed all over the place. And we just firmly believe that the Kentucky National Guard should serve in Kentucky to manage our natural disasters or areas where they're needed. And if there's not a declared war, we should not be sending our Kentucky Guard all over the world.
That's a good point. My cousin was in the National Guard and he was deployed to Afghanistan.
Well, this came up last session, and there were some in the Veterans Committee that were vehemently opposed to this, and they argue that if we were to adhere to this, only deploy our guard when we have a declared war, then the Kentucky National Guard would be declared a militia, and we would lose federal funding, and then we wouldn't have the sufficient funds in Kentucky to fund our own guard and defend our own borders. And, they brought in a general to speak on this issue. And, he was pretty persuasive. But as more and more as I've looked at this and studied at this, I just don't see how those at the federal level are going to say, okay, Kentucky, we're going to pull our funding for you. And part of it, it's on our own state sovereignty. So there's a lot of issues with this. But if we are constitutionally, if we are not in declared war by Congress, which we haven't had, should we be deploying our guard all over the world? I would argue no. We were very concerned last session. I believe it was House Bill 11 that got rid of the vape products. They have to be FDA approved, and only like 4% of the vaping products are FDA approved. This was a tremendous overstep of government to regulate small business, telling them what they can and can't sell. There's many things that we sell, various vitamins, supplements that are not FDA approved, and yet these specific industries were targeted by big tobacco to close, which eliminates, a lot of people are trying to do smoking cessation. if we look at the people of Kentucky, smoking is a problem. If this is a step going vaping versus smoking that helps them quit smoking or to get off of it, or a less harmful, some would argue, way to stop smoking, why would we limit those? And I was opposed to House Bill 11 when it came up. I've heard from many small business people crying out to me saying, can you help us? Can you help us? Well, I cannot, because the majority vote was to go ahead and get rid of these non-FDA approved vapes. So right now there is a lawsuit, and I believe it's up to the Supreme Court, and they haven't made a ruling on that. So all this bill does is kind of, hey, put a stay on this. Can we allow people to continue to conduct their business while the Supreme Court were awaiting their ruling? Because the process for these people, if they were to lose this and then have to go all back through the application process and all the fees and things that they have to pay to get back in business, it's insurmountable. So this is just, let's take a pause on this. Let's wait till the Supreme Court makes a ruling. Let's see what the courts have to say before we just go ahead and say, oh, nope, can't sell that anymore.
I mean, are cigarettes FDA approved?
And this is where we get into a lot of, the power of lobbyists. They're pretty powerful.
We've been asking our legislators, if you can tell us, we like your bill, we want to follow the bill, we want to help you get it passed. What is it that the constituents really need to be doing?
Well, it's a lot on the legislators to follow the bills. So this week, our first weekend, we had a really interesting discussion on the rules. And one of the things that came up, which is new for me, is when we submit a bill to be filed, it goes to committee and committees, which is basically its leadership. Before, leadership would make the sole determinators of what bills go out to committees. What we were told, and which I now see in our new rules of 2025, is that every bill that goes to committee and committees is eligible to go out to the standing committee that it's supposed to go to. Now, the chair is still going to need to call that bill. We're still going to have to go lobby it. So I think, part of it is on us to let you all know, like I'm telling you about my House Bill 142. I want you guys to follow that, to help push that bill, and to see if we can get that to go through. But every day after we file bills, at the end of the day, the LRC lists what bills have been filed. You yourself can go and look at them, like you've got up on the screen now, looking at the bills that I've done. Part of it is, I think the most important part is once you see it come up on the agenda in the committees, that's when you really need to watch it. Because at that point, if a bill has gone to the committees and passed, now it may be different now because our rules are a little bit different. That means that bill has got a 99.9% chance going through because the legislator has gone to the chair and has lobbied that bill, and has gone to all the committee members and has lobbied that bill, and at least has the majority that they feel like it's going to pass. That's the only way they will bring it. So part of it is if there's a bill that somebody's very passionate about, I would say now, which is a little bit different from before, I think people can be more proactive on looking at the bill, but you got to guess which committee it's going to go to. Some are straight up judiciary, right? Because my 142 carries a felony penalty. It has to go to judiciary. Sometimes you have a bill that can go to licensing and occupations, or you can get it through veterans, military affairs, public protection. There's different avenues bills can go, but it's always important to lobby the chair because that's the person who ultimately calls it, and then people on that committee. I mean, you can see how many hundreds of bills were filed, and they said they weren't going to push them out until we start session part 2 on February 4th. So I don't even know what committees they're going to go to or how many are going to be called. I think it's important to watch the agenda on the committees. What are they calling? Really, this is the best way, looking at LRC, look at the bills and see where they've been assigned, and then going from there. What is not effective is sending in form letters. I hate when I get form letters where they say all the same thing because you're not even taking the time really to let me know what you think. And those are often coming from groups, right? Groups will push out various form letters, but I find it, for me, it has a lot more meaning when I read what somebody's telling me, like about these vapes, for instance. I had a lot of phone calls and emails about that, and hearing their stories, and that really impacts me, and certainly helps my understanding of a issue that they maybe have, that if I just get a form letter, I'm not really going to get. And certainly when people don't even take the time to fill in dear, whatever, or where it says sign your name and they don't sign their name. But I think contacting legislators and I would be clear, concise, state the facts, state the concerns without a lot of when people start off with all kinds of derogatory things and name calling, that doesn't go far. But also, if you're willing to write it, be willing to put your name and your address on it, because if I would get a lot of things from Louisville, right? There's a bill right now that is particularly controversial for people in Louisville. It's more of a Louisville bill and more responsive certainly to my constituency. But if I was on that committee that this particular bill would be impactful, well, of course I'm going to listen to that. Clear, concise, to the point, your name, where you live, and what the concern is. So, it's been really interesting to me. I have sent out, I think there's a little over 3,000 randomized surveys. They were sent to, I don't know where they went, but they were constituents in my district. I don't get to pick and choose. So they went out and I've got a surprising amount back. And what's very interesting on certificate of need, which is the government permission slip to allow a health entity to enter into Kentucky or to expand services for those who are already here without the government's blessing. I'm surprised by how many are kind of undecided. And that says to me, they're not informed on the issue. I have not gotten any back that say, yes, we need certificate of need. Yes, we need it. Not one. I don't know how many I have. They come in multitudes of ways. So I think we'll really be tabulating all that data and really sifting through it in February, end of February. Hopefully we'll be still getting them back by then. But I think that there's still some work on my part to help people understand what certificate of need is, how it impacts Northern Kentucky. I think people are aware of, they only have one place to go to a hospital in Northern Kentucky. They know that, but they don't understand why. So part of that on me is I need to continue my messaging on what it is and why you have limitations. So I do plan to bring a couple bills this year on certificate of need. I plan to file them the first week that we go back. They're going to be very similar to what I filed last year, which is House Bill 203 and 204. Last year, House Bill 203 addressed specific services that Kentucky in 2013, after they did a health facilities capacity report with the implementation of Obamacare. They were looking to see where were we already deficient in Kentucky, or did we have any problems? What was it going to look like for us? Back in 2013, the cabinet determined that we were deficient in mental health, ambulatory surgical centers, home health, hospice, ambulances. I mean, those were 5, just to name a few. So when I look at the areas that we were already in trouble, certainly with mental health in 2013, we know we've got more of a health crisis now. We still haven't done anything to loosen up the certificate of need on those services. So I plan to bring those services. The one I'm going to not have on there this year will be the freestanding birthing centers, because that's already another bill, but really addressing the specific services. So that's healthcare for mental health, chemical dependency, dialysis, home health. But I took off hospices and I took off the freestanding birthing centers. We'll see if those go through. I think those are the least objectionable to the hospitals, because those aren't really profitable. But my goodness, for people in Northern Kentucky that are that need dialysis, I don't understand why we have to limit those. I don't understand why we have to limit home health when that is the model trend to get people home more quickly, where we know that they recover quicker and better, and it's less costly. So I don't know why we're limiting those, but I will be filing that. And then I will also be filing the identical bill that I did last year, 204, that eliminates the competitor veto. So all that means is if a new health entity wants to enter into the state of Kentucky, they still have to show there's a need. They still have to go through the substantive review, which is a complex 9-step process that the cabinet determines if they're deemed sufficient or not. What this does, though, it eliminates the dominant provider from being able to sue a new entity that wants to come in at steps 3 and 9. So it really levels the playing field. It allows for the new entity to be able to present its case to the cabinet without the dominant provider suing them from the ability to do so. So, because when a lawsuit gets involved at step 3, more often than not, the cabinet will automatically deny the new applicant. So it just keeps fostering that monopoly. So that's all I'm going to run. That's all the bill really does. It was painted as some horrible thing last session, like it was going to be the end of the world. It didn't change certificate of need at all. It just eliminated somebody being able to sue out. And we certainly have history of that. If you look at when the Christ wanted to come in, I believe it was back in 2017, they wanted to come into Old Drawbridge Inn, and they had grand plans of what that was going to look like and the economic impact that was going to be, because they were bringing in restaurants and lodging and all kinds of things for an ambulatory surgical center. And St. Elizabeth's was like, no, you can't do that. And Christ spent years and millions of dollars going through this process. They were able to obtain the certificate of need from the cabinet, but St. Ne's ultimately sued them, and the Christ lost the appellate level in court. So I'm not so sure we want the courts to decide that. I'd like to leave that out and really let people, if you're ready, willing, and able to make the economic investment into Kentucky, and you want to bring those services and you want to provide more jobs and opportunities for people and provide maybe a specialty or a different type of healthcare, my goodness, we should be welcoming that in Kentucky, not saying, no, we don't need it. The argument is, if we let competition come in, then it's going to close all of our rural hospitals. But I can tell you, since 2004, we've had 4 rural hospitals close, and that is with certificate of need in place. So I'm not sure that certificate of need is the issue. It's certainly more of a funding issue. But what's really interesting is we had a committee meeting this week in health, and the Kentucky Hospital Association was there and presenting. And what I found really interesting is they're saying that they're improving their outcomes and that hospitals are doing great in Kentucky economically. So I'm a little puzzled by the article I read this summer that said we have 17 rural hospitals that are in danger of closing, and 4 of them are imminent danger of closing. So I hope to be able to explore that a little bit more and have some more conversations about that. Talking about, I'm not unsympathetic to rural hospitals. They don't have the volume that our urban areas have. They don't have the kind of beds. The personnel is difficult. I'm not unsympathetic to their issues, but I will continue to argue it's more of a reimbursement issue than it is a competition issue. And if rural hospitals are in such dire straits and barely making it, I don't think we're going to have a host of people coming into rural Kentucky to try to compete with the rural hospitals. If it's such a losing proposition financially, why would anybody want to make that investment? My concern is now with Trump winning that people are going to go back and kind of rest on their laurels and not continue the vigilance. And this is where we always get into trouble. So people need to remain vigilant now more than ever to keep this momentum going forward and to hold people responsible and accountable.
And we can only make changes locally. I can't control what's going on nationally, so we can get involved locally.
But how would we get people to do that? Because here in Northern Kentucky, we only have one media news market, right? It's Cincinnati. And then everybody turns into Fox News or CNN, and that's where they get all their news from mainstream media. And they aren't aware. When do they talk about Kentucky issues on mainstream media? I mean, it's pretty rare. It takes a mass shooting or it takes something that Bashir is doing that we make the news. We just don't. Unlike if you just go down in a different media market, my goodness, all my colleagues, they're on the news all the time. Everybody knows exactly what's going on with what bills and who's doing what. We just don't have that information as readily available when people have to seek it out. And I think for a lot of people, they're busy. They're raising their families. They're going to work. They're doing their volunteer. They're living their lives, and they don't seek out perhaps as much as some of us.
Well, I also think that's kind of by design, because I feel like the Northern Kentucky market, these media outlets in particular, are beholden to their sponsors and people who are giving them money to cover stories or ads for them. And I mean, St. Elizabeth gives a lot of money, so
Yes, they
they're
do.
definitely not going to want to talk about Marianne Proctor.
Oh,
What
but the
she's
link
doing.
the link to talk about me this last week, they put out an article about my House Bill 142.
Oh,
Yeah, so I'm really excited this year. I got every committee that I requested. I'm really excited about being on health. That is my wheelhouse and my area of expertise. So that's really exciting. I'm on primary and secondary education, just dealing K through 12 and all the issues that go with that. So that's a new committee for me. I was on it in the interim, but they actually just split that committee. They split education. So I am on one of the new branches of it. I'm on state government, which I'm really excited about, looking at things from a higher level from the state perspective, and then staying on veterans, military affairs, and public protections. That is one of my all-time favorite committees. So I'm really pleased I was able to retain that. But I'm really looking forward to 3 of these committees are new to me, and really diving in and to really make some good progress in these areas that are certainly, some of my top 3 or 4 priorities.
Well, we'll be in touch regarding the education.
Oh, yes, I think you can anticipate the DEI. I think there's going to be some accountability with the amounts of money that we're sending out. I mean, I'm hearing rumors of things, but I'm really hoping that we make some meaningful changes. It's a short session. Leadership has said we are not going to be doing major overhauls, really going back to what the short session was intended to do. So we'll see, but I certainly think some of the issues that were brought up last session that we were not able to get across the finish line in the Senate will be revived in the House.
Well, thanks again, Marianne. We appreciate you.
We're continuing the fight. I appreciate what you guys do.
Use your brain and do your research.